Hey y'all, I'm Umisu. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. I'm the producer of Periodically Queer, Director of Content Strategy here. Good to be here with y'all. Just gonna take us back a little bit. So when I was interviewing for this job, I pitched to the hiring committee an idea of making a podcast that would bring queer history back to its original medium of sound and stories. And it's come a full circle today, so thank you so much for all the support. Let's see. And stories play a critical role in world building. You know, we've got bedtime stories, news stories, family stories, and really our stories as a community. Stories are the foundation of what we believe to be true. They bring about change because they reach people's hearts. When I first visited One Archives at the USC libraries, I was astounded by the large periodical collection there. It covers US and international titles in 46 different languages. Just like flipping through the pages, I sensed the voice of the community behind each publication, each issue, and sometimes, behind each page and article. And this resonates with the origin of our story as One. As the publisher of One Magazine, which was established almost 70 years ago. I think it'll be 70 November this year. So we thank you for being with us as we kick off Periodically Queer, our new podcast today. Before we dive in to the episode previews, I'd like to thank the folks behind the scene. Jennifer Gregg, our executive director, for believing in me and supporting this project from the very beginning. Jamie Sharon Cohen, our Mellon ACLS Public Fellow, who is a co-producer of one of the episodes and spearheaded much of the research for the podcast. Eric Adamian, our former director of education, for hosting one of the episodes, and our wonderful interns, Shea Yu, for supporting the production, and Ambika Nagaheli for their research support. Thank you, Fatih Zuleka, for providing media support, Maxwell Fong for the graphic design work. Special shout out to my friend, composer, and historian, Analog Tara, for her music, and my friend Quincy Sarah Smith for mixing and editing, engineering the tracks, making sure that everything is optimal listening experience. And finally, many, many, many thanks to all the podcast guests for their generous sharings. And we have many of these wonderful folks here today. So it is a true celebration. Thank you for being a part of it. All right. So without further ado, I would like to just dive into episode 1. And episode 1, In Search of Queer Ancestors, dropped this morning. This episode focuses on the history of Lavender Godzilla, the newsletter and magazine of GAPA, GLBTQ Asian Pacific Alliance, founded in the San Francisco Bay Area in 1988. I was fortunate enough to speak with John Silva, a regular contributor to Lavender Godzilla, and Dino Duazo, a founding member of GAPA and an editor of Lavender Godzilla. John is here with us, tuning in from the Philippines, and we will be listening to him, and he will be joining me for a brief conversation after the preview. And Dino hopefully will be able to hop on as well. So let's have a listen to the preview of the episode. I used to dream of a whole community of people, LGBTQ plus people of Asian descent, who are like me, trying to live their lives in ordinary and extraordinary ways. From Lavender Godzilla, I could sense the activist spirit and community belonging. They made me feel like I'm a part of something larger than me, a feeling of kinship.
It's a blend of the queer perspective, the lavender, and then the Asian perspective with Godzilla, which is ancient and modern. It's this dinosaur, but it's really tied into the modern world. It can be destructive, but the lavender softens it, makes it like a non-binary thing. It kind of reflects our community too. Like there's this kind of passive stereotype.
So the gay Asian man had to be kind of sexy and had certain qualities, and it was all made up.
I asked him what it felt like to have found a photograph of a gay Asian ancestor during his research.
He took the photograph, and you can clearly see the man washing the clothes was somewhat effeminate, looking straight at the camera, very demure, and I could feel, you know, I could feel like transmitting this sort of connection with him through over 100 years, knowing that he was my ancestor.
Our community has this kind of strong intergenerational component. There's a lot of interaction and commingling and sharing between so many different generations.
From Lavender Godzilla, I've discovered some hidden spaces in which queerness can thrive within a family.
I grew up with a nanny instead of a mother. My mother, of course, was always there, but my nanny was really my physical mother. I can remember her loving and her embraces much more intently than I would with my own mother. So I wrote about that. I felt that that was important. And she defended me when I was starting to show my effeminate ways. My father, who was a strict disciplinarian and was a military man, would get so angry with me and demand that I march like a man. But when I would, I was such a flagrant queen, a little queen. And so if when my father would get so upset with me, my nanny would rush to my defense and take me up and run away with me so that I wouldn't be touched by my father. Eventually, my father came around. I want you to know that dad also respected and was supportive of my coming out and supportive of my lover and now married partner. We've been married for now 46 years.
So, we have some questions for you. And we like to ask you, who did you become family with? Who are your LGBTQ plus ancestors? Where are they? How did you find them? Feel free to use the chat box to share. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to do that. And in the meantime, we're going to bring up our guest, John. And I think this episode really gets into this idea of redefining family, as you will hear um, in the full episode. And that's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and pretty much everywhere, anywhere you find your podcasts. So, but yeah, sort of definitions of family, people who've become family with over time. Thank you, Amy, for sharing. Best friend from high school, Christopher. Thank you, Karen, for sharing. What does LAAPIS stand for those of you who don't know? Julia, that's great. First queer family was roller derby league. The Los Angeles roller derby dolls. That's awesome. Ah, okay. Thanks for letting us know. The Los Angeles Asian Pacific Islander sisters as family. That's pretty cool. Christopher talks about the Pomona Pride Center as his new family. Russell shared that Russell adopted 3 kids who are now teenagers, and they will now have ancestors. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. All right, so that's chat for a little bit. John, what do you think? Okay, we're gonna ask you to unmute. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, and it looks like Dino's here, so we're gonna bring Dino on as well. Hi, Dino.
Hello.
So glad you
Hi,
made it.
Dino.
Hi.
Wow. So in the episode, you will find that Dino and John used to know each other when they were both living in the Bay Area. John lives in the Philippines now and is tuning in from the Philippines, and it's, I believe, 8 o'clock in the morning. So thank you for doing that, joining us. And Dino's in the Bay Area. I just wanted to kind of circle back with y'all. It's been a little bit since we last talked. We've had wonderful conversations for the podcast, and I don't know if you've had a chance to listen yet, but please do. Episode 1 was basically released today, but I just wanted to kind of ask you a question. What's it like to be a part of this project, knowing that like podcast is a medium of sharing stories, and what you shared is going to be out there in the world? How does that feel?
Well, for me, basically, I mean, it's been so long since I've been involved with Godzilla, and actually, I'm starting to get involved again. But it's just realizing the impact we had in the past, or like how it goes through the decades and the different generations. It's nice to be reminded that just whatever, I mean, things that we create actually make a difference, even though when we're doing it, it may not seem like it was that much, but over time, I guess, it hits people in different ways. And it's just a good reminder of that too, just by being part of this.
Well, going through the pages of Lavender Godzilla after 40 years, I guess, I'm really struck at how much creative input was put into this magazine and the kind of articles that appeared. And I think I really want to thank Dino. Dino is sort of the editor of this Godzilla. It had a very queer name, Lavender Godzilla. It was a Godzilla turned queer kind of a situation. It was a sense of pride whenever an issue came out. And it push me to write things about gay topics, gay subjects that you wouldn't necessarily write about for other publications. It was only exclusively with Lavender Godzilla. So in that sense, that was my family, and that was a really a good creative time.
I've asked you to sort of dig up some memories for the podcast, and and these memories are now stories for people, for a larger public. Very much similar to what you did for the magazine, for the newsletter, right? Like you asked people to share their stories, and in sharing the stories, you created a community. Do you feel like in any way this podcast is doing that? Like it's sort of, is there it's sort of a different community that can come together
Yeah, definitely. It's just opening up a whole different audience for folks that may not have heard of what we've done. And so somebody just posted about our queer ancestors, and I guess that's who we are. And so, I mean, the years have passed really quickly. I don't think John or I think of ourselves as that
Old.
old, but we are. So yeah, it's just nice to be able to share this for new generations, and if they have any interest, or if we pique their interest, maybe they can look at the issues. They can look at new issues we're creating. We just released one a new Lavender Godzilla issue last Friday. So it's like um, getting involved with the podcast actually pushed um, us to kind of push gap but create new issues. So it's one of the kind of the little one of the things that help us move it along some more.
And John, you wrote this article about a gay ancestor, and it was in 1990, and when I found it, I knew I had to get in touch with you. And you talked about the feelings of connecting with an ancestor through a photograph. Like, can you just say a little bit more about that?
Well, as a photo archivist and historian, I was really hit by this article in a book by a Spanish Filipino man named Felix Laureano in 1880s. And he was taking pictures all over the country and came upon this clearly what looked like an effeminate man with two others washing clothes by the river. A man washing clothes by the river was not necessarily common. So he already stuck out, and plus the fact that he just clearly had this wonderful queer gaze directly at the camera. And then Laureano adds to the what I thought of as a picture by saying, and this man, he says, is a binabayi or an agi, meaning a queer person. And he identifies and affirms what I saw. It was so shocking. So over 100+ years old, and to see this ancestor was really very satisfying and very profound for us. For us who always thought that maybe it was just our generation or our period, but it's always been there, and we're part of this continuum.
Yeah. I think, coming from an Asian family context as well, for me, it was incredible seeing that your search happened and is continuing to happen, and that I feel like I can connect to your search, this quest that you've been on, and feel like I'm a part of this, you know, community, a larger universe. And that was so moving. And I think, just being, I'm of Taiwanese and Chinese descent. And I think, within my tradition, this notion of a family tree genealogy is very patriarchal. There's not a whole lot of space for queerness. And to see, and to hear stories from y'all about kind of how community making is family making, and to do so in such creative ways, either organizing events, theater, chorus, but also to an extent of like forming communities with folks who really need the care, folks who um, had um, trouble with their health due to AIDS and HIV, and also just knowing that the sense of family is an ongoing thread, and it just meant so much. Thank you so much for sharing. Um, is there anything else that you'd like to share, like, before we jump off to the next episode? any kind of words that you would like to share and leave behind with the live audience today?
Well, I would say that seeing again Lavender Godzilla, all those pages, I know that had a lot to do with giving me training on writing about queer perspectives and getting affirmation and acknowledgement, which made me a better writer for this particular area, which you usually sort of put aside. And eventually I wrote a book on affection between gay Filipinos or Filipinos then who in studio portraits in the 1920s and 1930s. And I had to study that, and then sometimes it would be revealed that they were gay, that they loved another man. And there was this incredible sense of bonding and friendship. So I have a lot to thank Lavender Godzilla for the kind of training that I got. That would be therefore my family in a sense. That magazine itself, of which I have copies of. I still have copies here in my library, all the way here.
That's great. Well, I think the main thing for me is for Lavender Godzilla, it's what GAPA was about too. It's about self-determination. This was by us, for us. We're not waiting for others to kind of tell our stories. We're making sure that they get told through our actions or through our efforts. So I think that's the main thing. The fact that it was really important for us to share who we are, share with each other, and create community, create family and community. So I think that's pretty much it, I guess.
Thank you so much. Take care. We're gonna jump into the next episode now. Thank you so much for joining us. It was very special.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna jump into episode 2, A Beacon of Hope. This episode will drop next Thursday on July 7th, and it features the story and the history of Homan Magazine and stories around the LGBTQ Iranian community. Eric Adamian hosted this episode and led a beautiful conversation with Albert Makpoule and Pam Gasemlu, who are co-founders of Homan Los Angeles. Eric and Pam will join us for a chat after the preview. Okay, let's hear it.
The magazine, regardless of the content, it was a symbol that something exists that written for Persian Iranian community. And just having that magazine and seeing that was like, it was so validating.
Working with Homan, and for many years after that, I had not come out. It was very odd for me, honestly, when I think about it, that here I was active with a group of friends trying to run an organization that is promoting LGBTQ rights, and here I was not out.
With all the political content, I saw a continuity between magazine distribution and political organizing. It felt like political actions were translated into magazine pages, and vice versa. What's in the magazine was translated into political actions.
When I went to Iran I think the first one was 2004, after my second visit, I took some of the magazine with me, and I was able to pass it on to few people I had met. Taking it to Iran was risky for me, but I had decided to do it. And so I wrapped it like 2 or 3 layers of wrapping in case they opened the suitcase.
The Homan community was an activist center to organize for LGBTQ rights. It also provided LGBTQ community services and social support. It practically functioned as a resource center for Iranian LGBTQ people.
We provide a wonderful resource, a helpline, a phone number people would call and they could talk to someone
we were getting calls actually from Iran, from the, again, lesbian people, transgender, or even some parents who they did not know how to handle their son or daughters being gay or lesbian. They didn't know what to do. Their kids was gay, came out, found out, and they didn't know what to do. And they were reaching out to get some more information.
As you know, the rate of suicide is very high in LGBTQ community, and having visibility helped for people not feel so hopeless and alone, and hopefully maybe we save lives.
It absolutely has had the effect of saving lives and showing us to be brave. I can speak for myself as an Armenian Iranian LGBTQ person. When I showed pictures of the magazine to my parents, I had to find a way to sneak this into the conversation with them. I told them, "Oh, look what I found at One Archives today." When they saw the magazine, they were able to understand that Iranian LGBTQ culture is actually a topic that's talked about among a community of people worldwide. It has been talked about for decades and millennia, even. Precisely that visibility piece has been missing in everyday conversations, and visibility is in many ways the first step to fostering acceptance in the community.
So, our next audience interaction is around this question of which magazines have moved you to action. And I guess magazines, or nowadays social media accounts, YouTube channels, perhaps. Which media project has moved you to action? Thank you for sharing, Jackie. Autostraddle, Amy Ross mentioned the Lesbian Tide. Yes. Sadie has been reading a lot of the Yes magazine. Holly talks about the students' Discord thread. Cool. Be okay, of course. Yes. Thank you for sharing that, Chiadu. Tony. That's really cool. The Gay Community News, GCN, in the 1990s, the Lesbian Nation, mentioned by Karen. Yes. Queerzine, Virtual Archive. So that's a collection, a digital collection of cuisines that Holly has just shared. That's great. So we're going to bring up two guests, Eric, who is the host of this episode, as well as Pam, a guest of episode 2. Hi, Pam.
Hello.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
So good to see you both.
Good to see you too.
Well, I've been hearing your voices for the last, month or so, and so nice to be able to connect. And I have a couple questions for you both, and different questions for each, and then there's one combined question. So, Eric, you described this podcast as coming a full circle for you, like when we talked about this project and your involvement and relationship to Homan. Would you share a bit about that, like your relationship to Homan, with our audience today?
Yeah, I would love to. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm so pleased to be here. again at One Archives Foundation event. Regarding Homan and my involvement in it, I mean, I was not involved in the magazine creation or anything, but the first time that I came across it, it was in One Archives in 2017. And I think one day, Mike, one of the archivists at the archive, was just like, oh, by the way, have you seen these magazines that are about the Iranian LGBTQ community? And I was like, what? That exists? I didn't know that it existed up until then. And it was a very affirming moment for me to kind of see LGBTQ topics being talked about in Farsi. And I was reading through some of the issues and some of the pages, and it was right there. They were talking about everything that I've learned about LGBTQ things in English, but it was in Farsi. And that was just such a big moment for me. This is something that recently, I mean, over the years I've discovered, but especially recently I've understood that language is such an important part of self-development. And personally for me, seeing the Homan Magazine was, you know, as I said, very affirming. And so when the podcast project was brought up and I was asked to host this episode, I got so excited. And it was in many ways a full circle for me, because 2017 was towards the beginning of when I had started my work at One Archives Foundation. And I recorded this episode with Pam and Albert on my very last day of being at One Archives Foundation. So it is one of the biggest gifts that I took away with me while I was employed there. So I hope that gives a little bit of context.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. It's a gift for us as well. I was so happy that we were able to have you on tape as part of the episode. Pam, so much of what you said in the episode was so moving, and so much about healing. And you mentioned that you work as a psychotherapist, and have been doing that for many, many years, for decades. I'm wondering how much of your work as a therapist is related to what you did with Homan. How has Homan influenced your development as a professional, or even as a person?
Thanks for having me, and thanks for this program. I was involved with Homan when I was a lot younger, and involvement with Homan and hearing people's stories, their struggles, it helped me to have greater empathy for the suffering we go through as the LGBT community. And when I was involved with the magazine and Homan, I got to have a chance to interact with many LGBTQ Iranians and Middle Easterns. And I learned so much about the struggle we all go through for basic things, to be able to love the person we choose, to be able to have freedom to express ourselves, to be respected by family and by the community. So as a therapist, it helped me have a greater empathy when I work with people and when I hear about their coming out story. And it also made me realize how precious our freedom is and how vulnerable we are, and how much we need to be active and proactive to protect our hard-earned freedom.
Absolutely. You've talked beautifully about providing a safety shelter for individuals and building an international underground community through the distribution and creation of Homan. So I'm wondering, like, taking a step back now, thinking about this podcast, I'm wondering now, like, about this podcast, about this episode on Homan, like, what do you think it can do to contribute to the visibility work of the LGBTQ Iranian community in our current moment?
I think it's so important for people to realize it took so much hard work to get to a place where they're not putting us in jail for expressing ourselves. Because as you know, not that long ago, we were barred from many things. There were many analytical institutes that you couldn't study because you were gay or part of LGBT community, as early as in 80s. And we didn't have a lot of rights. And the new generation might not know how bad it used to be. So I'm hoping our stories would remind people that if we don't stand up for ourselves, we can regress back to dark ages. And we are beginning to see the signs of that. So it's very important to have podcasts like this and to interview people who can share stories about what it was like not to be able to have basic rights. So I'm very grateful for the work you all do to bring awareness to certain issues that people might have forgotten or don't realize.
Thank you so much. And history has work to do, and that is precisely our work here. Eric, did you want to share anything else? We're about time before we have to jump into episode 3 preview.
No, nothing other than thank you for again having me be a part of this, and thank you to Payam and thank you to Albert, who's not here with us, for your willingness and your openness to do. And just meeting you all and speaking with you was a very big moment for me. So I hope that this is only a stepping stone in continuing to foster a great community for LGBTQ plus Iranians. And just to the point that you were also saying, it is very important to know about the existence of magazines, of organizations from the beginning of when they started to exist, and it informs the current and future activism of, that we do in the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Beacon of hope. We're trying to hold it up. It means so much to us to be for you to continue to share this work. Thank you again. All right, we're going to jump into episode 3. And before we play the video, I'm going to invite Jamie to join me. The final episode features COLORLife magazine. And Jamie is a co-producer of this episode. And he will be joining me for a quick intro. Hey, Jamie.
Hi, me.
All right.
for
Tell us
having me.
about COLORLife episode.
Hey, everyone. So I'm Jamie Shern-Cohen. My pronouns are he, him. I'm actually in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, Lenape land, where I live, although I work at One Archives Foundation. And I'm also a scholar and writer. And I just wanted to give a tiny bit of background into how this episode came into being. So the 3rd episode of the 1st season will be focused on COLORLife magazine. And it's going to drop on Thursday, July 14th. So I hosted this episode, and the way that I came across COLORLife was actually I was doing research on the poet and multifaceted individual, a sort of saint who lived and made work in New York City. And I found in his archive at the Schomburg Center in New York City, a cover of COLORLife, where he was the cover boy, and it was a fabulous image. And I was like, what is COLORLife? And then it kind of left my mind. And when Umi and I started doing research about this project, we had this amazing guide made by Lonnie Shubiyama at One Archives, archivist there, of BIPOC periodicals for periodicals. And so COLORLife was on there, and I was able to really spend some time and look through these issues, and I was just so blown away. It only had a short run from 1992 to 1994, but it's a really, really powerful publication, and I'm so excited for people to learn more about it. I was able to interview 4 people who were very foundational to the process of creating COLORLife, though there are also many more. I just want to name the people I was able to interview and thank them. Mariana Romo Carmona, Lisette Chang, Sheila Mabry, and Vondora Wilson. They're all super generous in speaking with me when I pretty much cold called them. And so I'm gonna be back after this little video trailer with Lisette Chang for a quick chat.
Thank you, Jamie. All right, we're going to listen to some clips from episode 3.
I became involved in COLORLife as a result of conversations with community activists in 1991. This is going to be a publication in honor of our ancestors, in honor of their survival in the Americas, despite genocide, despite rape, despite attempts to exterminate, despite slavery, despite all the things that the colonizers have tried in order to get rid of us.
What was interesting to me about joining the work of COLORLife was just like the building of relationships when you focus on certain values and care within community. I remember the article I wrote was about being bisexual, the challenge of me being very out about being bisexual, and that people in the community would come to me and say that they actually would bi too, but they wouldn't say it in the community.
I always felt like a part of me was being left behind. I didn't feel like the whole me could attend, whereas COLORLife was one of the first places where the whole me could attend.
The premiere issue was something that we really thought about because we didn't want to be just the same old magazine with the pretty faces on the cover or the sexiest queer face, whatever. We ended up putting our backs. So it was the back of 4 of us with the words, "No more business as usual."
At that time, we were really exasperated with not being recognized, not being allowed to speak, not having a platform where we could speak, not even having meeting spaces that were parts of our communities, that we wanted to raise the funds to publish COLORLife, to publish a magazine that would belong to our communities, that would be produced by our communities with our own ideas, under our own rules.
All these different groups, it was the same identity politics that we were working on, where we were trying to live the political perspectives we were talking about, which actually is hard to do. We had a lot less access to resources than some of our other brothers and sisters did, but I felt that pushed us out on the fringe of the community.
We do this in a space that is beyond the margin. We're talking about marginalized communities. Even the margins become eventually co-opted in some way.
COLORLife maintained its integrity to the end, working within the constraints and resources that it had.
I remember reading a letter that was written by one of the new readers saying, "Thank you, COLORLife. Thank you for not having to have a cultural translation. My culture is being represented here. My family, my ancestry, who I am in all the ways that I am, my wholeness. We're not just queer. We're not just Black. We're not just Chinese. We're not just able-bodied. We're disabled. We're many, many different things."
That's so great. we're going to invite Lisette Chang to join us. And Jamie is going to lead the conversation. Hi, Lisette.
Hello. I was having some challenges, but I think I figured it out.
You are
There
here.
you go.
Great to see you.
Hi. I can't believe that June 28th, 2022, 2 days ago, was the 30th anniversary of the launch of the premiere issue.
Amazing.
And hi, how you doing? You're Umi?
Yeah, I'm Umi. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And of course, Jamie. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I consider it an honor and a privilege.
Thank you so much. You've provided so much background research and filling in the gaps, and even including finding that cover image of the premiere issue, No More Business as Usual, which is not held by One Archive. So thank you.
Yeah, I thought I had the full copy, but I just moved 2 weeks ago, and it was a miracle that I found it.
It's such a miracle. It happened. Yeah, miracle at gay Christmas, I guess.
Yeah, seriously.
So I guess, we have a few minutes to chat, not too much time, but I'm curious about how you felt when I first contacted you and asked you to talk about COLORLife, like kind of what went through your minds.
Well, for me personally, it was a seminal moment because in my life, I was 34. And you know what, you're in your 30s, 20s, you're very idealistic, all right? And there was a confluence of a lot of events going on in the early 90s. The Rodney King riots, the upcoming 1992 500 years celebration, quote unquote celebration of the Columbus discovery of Americas, and of course the AIDS epidemic that was just decimating our community, and it was just we needed to and the white gay controlled publications were just not really representing our most important values, our most important identities. We weren't just a one identity, community. And when we confronted QW, the editors of QW at the Lesbian Gay Community Services Center in, I believe it was in December of 1991, Von Dora, Lydell Jackson, and myself, and I remember my heart was pounding as if it was yesterday, because we were asserting our power, and we said, well, you're not, you're not, representing our voices, and they, weren't going to change anything. So that's when the three of us birthed, in a sense, as midwives, birthed the idea of COLORLife, and it just really came together in a powerful day at the American Indian Community House when Wiwa Bar Ampe, might be mispronouncing their name, but the Two Spirited organization at the American Community House invited us for a full day of creating the prototype with food, with resources. And all around me were like close to 13 activists in the community. From, we had Asian Pacific Islander, the representative Asian Pacific Islander, African-American, Latinx, Middle Eastern, you name it. And we just joined our forces and our resources. And John DeGlassen was a designer of the Village Voice. He had committed some guerrilla warfare and used the Village Voice resources, including when we did the cover. We were in the meeting room, in the conference room at the Village Voice, trying to figure out the cover. And he used the resources of the Village Voice to create a beautiful publication, very professional, for very little money, because we didn't have trust funds. We didn't have $1 million to just pour into a glossy like Out magazine, which came out at the same time. But we knew that this was a very important effort. It was a labor of love, and we ended up getting applauded. One of the biggest gifts we had was we were applauded by for our efforts by Audre Lorde, who was receiving cancer treatments in Berlin at the time, and wrote us a letter. It's actually the actual letter is in with the Audre Lorde Project, and the way she described it was poetry. Wow, jazz, Baldwin, COLORLife. This is, exactly. It was like, yes. And she donated. She contributed poetry that were from an unpublished poetry. Sapphire also contributed poetry. So we had the brilliance from all corners of our community just contributing, because this was something that had been unprecedented. This was a publication that needed to happen. It was an idea whose time had come, and had never been done before. Because you had the BLK, you have different publications, Radical Chick at the time, Sappho's Isle, New York Native, Genre, The Advocate, but there had never been a publication that really brought people of color, queer people of color together, and in all our intricacies and all our complications and beauty and depth, because we don't isolate ourselves from our ancestors. We don't isolate ourselves from our families, or at least we try not to. Of course, they may isolate themselves from us, but our families are important. Our ancestors are important. The fact that we our elders are important. Our children. Nobody is left behind. It's all everybody's important. And this idea of only our sexuality, is important. No, that's not how it works. That's not what life is about, and that's not what we were about. We're about very many things. So the free reissue covered, as a result, international adoptions written by a lesbian of, I believe she was a Korean descent, who was raised by white parents, and her experience. It included 2 Black gay men who adopted young Black kids, young Black boys, and their experience. It included a union organizer. It included, coverage on the from someone who was involved in international human rights organization, which was a part of the UN, about abuses throughout the world against transgender people. It was so it really
so much.
it was so much, and people were saying, listen, this is I was just reading one of the you said it said winter 95, the issue. I have an issue, and the letter from the editor said, a letter to the editor from someone named Sue Fowles, said, I was in New York in June and picked up your July 94 copy, enjoyed it heaps, especially the article by Lydell Jackson on role models Ben Jibo and Nick Biley, who was part of the American Indian organization I mentioned. We were Bars Chiampi. It's like, she says, it's like reading a mirror image of my own culture, genocide, oppression, assimilation, and that stuff about stereotyping, assuming we've been brought up on missions, reserves, etc. Unfortunately, we haven't got a magazine like that here for people of color. Well, not specifically gay and lesbian focused. It's hard enough trying to be recognized within the gay and lesbian community, period, in parentheses. We do have one positive, that of our own Aboriginal gay and lesbian radio program, 1 hour a week on Joy Melbourne radio. Now that's progress. I suppose I can't expect too much help. I mean, it was only in 1967 that we were included in the population census and able to vote. Anyway, I hope you can help me. P.S. I suppose you folks don't know anybody who's interested in being a pen friend with a Black sister from Australia, huh?
That's
So
great. Thank you.
yeah, so it really
we
is.
should wrap up, but
Yeah.
I feel like I can't believe all of the history you can just pull out of your mind. Like, you are such a community resource and amazing ancestor, and I'm really grateful for you. And I really encourage everybody to listen to the full deluxe interview podcast episode that we've got, and to hear more from Lisette and the others. So thank you so much.
Thank you, and I'm very proud of the impact that the magazine made on a lot of people's lives.
I think people are going to be so excited to learn, and it's incredible how many resonances there are, like, to the current moment, all the issues that you covered, all coming back, all never left. And I think that you provided such an inspiring and important model for how to approach being human. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisette. Thank you, Jamie. Listen on July 14th for the COLORLife episode. There are incredible stories and incredible insights on intersectional community building. So we're at about time. Thank you so much for joining our celebration for the podcast this evening. Quick reminder, today is Give Out Day, the only national day of giving for the LGBTQ community. It is your support that makes possible projects like this one. All right. Well, we are so excited that Periodically Queer is out in the world, out in the world on the last day of Pride Month. Please listen in the next couple of weeks for new episodes, and tell your friends about Periodically Queer, which is now available wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for tuning in.